And good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Kitchings Table here on WBIS LP 106.9 FM Awesome Radio. That's what they call it, Awesome Radio. Here every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. You can catch us here on the Kitchings Table. You can also catch us on social platforms at Roku, GPAC23, Facebook Live, and of course, YouTube. Today we are going to be talking about, man, this ought to be real good because when we talk about inventions, everybody has a short list, I'm sure, of what they feel maybe I won't say the best, but the greatest inventions to mankind. Joining me, my co-host, Ronleen Kennedy. Ronleen, good morning. And do you have your short list?
No, I don't have a short list, but
You have a long list.
I have some things I've thought about over the years, that's for sure.
Well, when we talk about inventions, and as I indicated, a short list of inventions and a short list of things that almost these inventions, the ones I have, are must have. It's like without these, a whole lot of other things won't even matter. The little small inventions, something like a paper clip, that a paper clip won't matter when we talk about some of the major inventions that man has made to, make the quality of life better. And we'll see where we go with that. But I got my short list, and I can't wait to share with our audience, and maybe they can compare and see what they had. So, but before we get into that, you had a special recognition that you wanted to do today, and we are on the tail end of Juneteenth, the holiday where Abraham Lincoln and the folks out in Texas finally got word that the slaves were free. And I'm sure if you ask some people in this day and time, they would probably argue that some remnants of that seem to still just kind of linger on and on and on based on how some things are dealt with and handled. But you have a special recognition that you wanted to do. So why don't you go ahead and take care of that?
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. Well, first of all, the special recognition, you, Earl.
Oh, here she goes. Here she goes.
So, Earl, you have, for as long as I remember, you have been doing the research on this on Jacksonville City, based on the things that your father has done with the school that he worked for, the people that he have developed, and you have made sure that that history was not lost. And I really want to appreciate you for that. Happy belated Father's Day and happy belated Juneteenth. In that history that you have done made me search out other history dealing, and we're bringing to the forefront today, um, Dr. Nathaniel, what he called himself, Nat Glover. He was the first black sheriff for the Jacksonville, Florida, and he served in the 1960s. He gave his so to a 37-year career as law enforcement. What surprised me about him that I didn't know is when they had the axe handle Saturday, in the 19, I think it was, the year was August of 1960, and he was finishing working Morrison Cafeteria. I don't know if anybody remember that, but he had a dishwashing job at the age of 17 as a dishwasher. So when he finished his day, he walked home. He was walking home and walked right into the mob of what was happening in Hemming Park. And as a result of that, because he is black, and even though he was a child or whatever, he still was hit, assaulted and whatever, and he went to a white officer, to try to get help, and he realized what the white officer told him: you better run, as you're going to get hurt or you may even die. And he said he realized he could have lost his life that day. But what I liked about him is that he was determined, not to allow that to be his life. and he felt like a coward, he said, when he went home for not staying around, to help, the mob that he's seen, as far as to be able to help his fellow um, people um, who were being injured that day. And, it was just one of those things. And for 1960, I remember some of the riots that I had come through, just being in Chicago, Illinois, of not really understanding what was going on, but I realized they had to deal with the assassination of Martin Luther King and the previous assassinations of John F. Kennedy and Malcolm X. So, with these things shaping us, and then where we are now, with the no more colored water fountains here in Hemming Park. All of that kind of thing, that separation, I'm just thankful that he came through that era. And today, what Nat Glover has been recognized for, he became, he was inducted into the Florida Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame. And after becoming sheriff, he served 2 terms. And when he became the what was that, the president for Edward Waters College, where he had retired from that as well, to turn the reins over to someone else. And what he said was, sometimes we can get into these offices and stay in there too long. And so I just think, with him moving out of that and to go into leadership, and now, he's looking for his book to launch, Striving for Justice, which is going to come out around that time of August 2023. So I'm just looking forward to greater things from him, to be able to teach what needs to be taught to not just to our youth, but as he stated, and before, he was putting people into the prison system. But now, when he came over to Edward Waters College, he was able to help those people to graduate and to become productive citizens, and to understand what their worth is into society. So that's who I wanted to talk about. And thank you so much for allowing that.
Well, we certainly want to give kudos to former President Dr. Nat Glover, former Sheriff of Jacksonville, Nat Glover, and all his time spent working to help better the quality of life in the city of Jacksonville. It was an interesting dynamic, and one of the things that perhaps some people don't know is the fact that not only was he the first black sheriff, African American person to serve as sheriff, because now we have another African American serving as sheriff in Jacksonville, but um, Nat Glover was very, very close to being the first black mayor of Jacksonville. But politics got in the way during that time, and he did not come out as the winner. But he was very, very close, Ronline. I don't know if you remember the circumstances surrounding it. I
Yes, that
don't.
was a nasty election. Yes.
And he had he. It was at a point where he could have won on the first ballot, but politics caused problems, and they went to a runoff. And when they went to the runoff, he lost. But he could have won it had politics not jumped in on the first ballot, because he was very popular. Everybody liked him. I think the other part to that is everybody had trust in him as the top, as they say, the top cop. But when we look back, as we always do with history, when we look back, we can understand better why some things did not work out in his favor. But he was destined. to receive and earn that position as the sheriff of Jacksonville. So I just thought I'd add that last little nugget to the fact that you brought that to us about Nat Glover and his trek. So from there, he went on to become, like you said, the president of his alma mater, Edward Waters College at the time, now Edward Waters University, and again a servant. And he served EWC or EWU, as you would call it now, for several years. And I think his understanding of not staying in a position too long. Oftentimes, individuals stay longer than they should. And when I liken it to a relay race, in a relay race in track, there are four members of the relay race: the first guy, second person, the third person, and the fourth person. And you cannot win that race by having the first person run the relay baton all the way to the fourth person. You get disqualified, or the first person runs the entire race and never passes the baton. And there have been times and situations where people just keep holding on to the baton, and then when they're ready to pass it on, there's nobody to pass it on to because the people who would have taken it, they don't want it. They like, nah, my time. You took up my time. You ran my time. You did my time because you never passed the baton on at the appropriate time. And to our listeners and viewers, please make every effort in whatever you're doing not to run the race holding on to the baton longer than you should. Pass it on to someone younger and teach them the process of passing the baton on to someone else. Because without that, we get stagnant or we get into a cycle, and sometimes progress, some things, opportunities or organizations or whatever, they die because someone held on too long, too long. So I'm glad he has that concept and mindset of wanting to move on beyond running the race for as long as he. I mean, because he probably could have stayed the president at the college even till now. I don't think the alumni were upset with him. I don't think the board of trustees were upset with him. I think he could have stayed till now. However, and I'll close with this: the way that the college has grown recently in the last 3 to 4 years under the new and current president, um, perhaps that time would have not happened if Mr. Glover, Dr. Glover, has stayed in office. We don't know. We don't know, but we do know that he had the foresight to pass it on, and the baton got passed on, and they went from a college to a university. Another president. So kudos to him, and we thank him for his service here in Jacksonville. Ronleen, I'm gonna give you a homework, not a homework assignment. I'm gonna give you an assignment while we're doing the show today uh, to look up who was the first black sheriff in the state of Florida, because that might be an amazing piece of information as we talk about our inventions today. So if you get an opportunity to have that before we end the show, that'll be fine. If not, we won't worry about it. Now, so we're talking about great inventions today, and I identified, I think I was five, six. I identified six inventions that, in my opinion, IMO, for those of you who do a lot of texting and you see that IMO and don't know what it means, in my opinion, um, I have six great inventions that, like I said, they are must have in this day and time that we live in. And of course, the first, the first great invention, because without it, nothing else transpires. When we talk about the quality of life, and that would be the inventing of electricity. So this, I asked anyone if they don't think that was a great invention, then give me something better. But electricity to me is probably what is number one on my list. Number one on my list. The other ones, I put them in an order, but they don't necessarily have to be in that order. But electricity is at the top. And in January of 1879, in Menlo Park, New Jersey, Thomas Edison built his first high resistant incandescent electric light. Started with a light, but he also had to work on creating ways to make electricity happen because electricity is a science. It doesn't just happen. So with him building that and creating a electricity system, because Edison did built the light, but um, there was another gentleman who was working at the same time Edison was that was creating a ways to harness electricity. And between the two of them, this made for probably the greatest invention ever because in our world that we live in today, almost everything runs off electricity. If not electricity, even now we get to these electric cars. If not electricity, then the sister to electricity would be the battery, but it
Mm-hmm.
is a form of power. So they both provide power to make things work, to make machines operate, to make lights happen. So without this electricity, excuse the pun, we would still be in the dark ages because they brought light. Candlelight was not going to get it. Can you imagine trying to live in today's world by candlelight? Uh, when you think about stoves, who could cook on an open fire in their house? You think about a microwave. Well, the microwave works. It's a great invention, probably one of the inventions that should be on the list. But without that electricity, it does not work. So you got to have some power. Got to have some power, and I'm thankful that Thomas Edison. And when I think of the other gentleman's name, I'll bring it to you. But he was a guy who really kind of brought this electricity thing. We hear Thomas Edison, but we don't hear about this other gentleman who actually created the electrical grids that give us the power that we use. So that's my first one. You have something that you want to share right now, Ronline, about an invention?
So today, what makes our show work is the internet. And without that, I mean, without power, as you said, I mean, we wouldn't have be able to connect to our modems. So yes, that I know we have wireless and things like that, but sometimes wireless, it'll fail you. But hooking it up to power, that always works. So thank you for bringing that because without the power, we wouldn't have refrigeration. Without the power, we wouldn't have air conditioning. So yes, very
Okay.
necessary.
Well, you said the internet. So, in order for us to have the internet, we must have a what?
A router.
Nope.
Okay. What we must have
I can't get on my router and get on the internet.
without the power, right?
No, I got the power,
Okay.
but what am I connecting to in order for me to get on the internet?
Oh, the computer and the device.
Thank you. See,
Yes.
the
And the mobile
internet
phone.
the internet is just a almost an application of some sorts. I mean, you that allows us to communicate, but without that, we still had to have that computer.
Yeah.
So that was on my list, or that's on my list, the computer. And just to give you some background, the first computer was invented by Charles Babbage in 1822. It was invented then, but it was not built. Okay,
Mhm.
understand this. It was invented then, but it was not built. Although that is not actually true because we know that computers um, were and we talk about computers from major computers, the big computers that you see, and it makes me think about the computer system that they had in the movie uh, about the ladies who worked at NASA, that computer system. But uh, computer science was invented by Alan Turing, and the first electronic general purpose digital computer was invented in 1945, and they said it filled up a room. And and then the first personal computer came along in 1973. So 28 years later, after the first big computers were made, we had personal computers. But uh, Charles Babbage is given credit for starting something way back when. Uh, Probably didn't work very well because wasn't any electricity. I'm trying to understand. He invented they give him credit for a computer, but it was no electricity. So of course it's not going to really work. 'Cause what is he going to power it with?
Mm.
I guess he had a crank. You crank, like the old phonograph system. You wound it up, and that gave you some power. But the computer is definitely a great invention. And in this day and time, I doubt we could get any work done with any speed and or accuracy to a point without a computer. It is the lifeline of communications in this day and time, uh, and uh, it's just one of those things. So that's a very good thing. And then when you couple that with another great invention, the telephone. Alexander Graham Bell invented the telephone. So without the telephone being invented, there would be no internet because there would be nothing to connect you with someone else over, as they say, uh, at the time before we got to these microwave systems of communicating with these towers. But you still have these lines of cable that carry signals through our homes and offices uh, so that we can communicate and operate and do business. But the telephone is probably another great invention, and Alexander Graham Bell came up with that, and we're thankful for that because it led to the cell phone. The cell phone. So I ask you, do you have any idea when the cell phone came on the scene?
Did it come on the scene in the 70s?
It
Because
did.
okay, because my I remember my uncle was like the first one that I knew that had one, and then of course Mr. Powell had the big box.
Yeah, people walking around with a bag with a phone in it, but that was at the time, that was the coolest thing to have. You carrying it around this bag with a phone in it, probably about a 12 inch by 6 inch bag or 4 inch bag that carried a phone that you could call and dial somebody up, which also led to, do you remember this? Car phones,
Yes.
And how would you know if someone had a car phone?
Well, it was a big center console that was sitting right there in the middle
But if you were outside of the car, how would you know they had a car phone?
because they would be talking on it.
Oh no, now you're not going to say that. If they're not talking on it, how would you know they got a car phone?
Oh, they made sure everyone knew that they had a car phone.
Okay, you can see you can see Ron is trying to figure out what I'm talking about. No, they used to have the antenna on the back window.
See, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, the antenna for the car phone was located on the rear window of your car, most of them. So if you saw that antenna on the rear window, then you knew that person had a car phone.
Now, is that the car? Is that the antenna that had like the little squiggly?
Yes,
Oh,
that's it.
okay.
That's it. That's the one.
Forgotten
So
about.
that was the beginning of the cell phone. And credited with the cell phone's invention is Martin Cooper, who was an American engineer that led a team in 72, 73 to build the first mobile cell phone and made the first cell phone call. He's given credit for that. He connected with some people over at the Motorola company, and I think Motorola is probably given credit for being the company that really uh, started or built cell phones or mobile phones, as they called it back then. Mobile phones. See, a mobile phone and a cell phone. So I think those are two distinct things. A mobile phone was a phone that moves around. You can take it wherever, but a cell phone is pretty much what we have and deal with today. But when you combine the two, you get what you get. But yeah, the man, if you wanted some prestige, have that little antenna on your back window, uh, and that gave you some instant prestige. Now, there were situations where in this capitalistic society, companies were just selling the antenna, and you just put this antenna on the back of your window to make it look like you got a car phone, when really all you got is that antenna. But you want to give that perception that you got a car phone. So but Martin Cooper is given credit for being the engineer who led a team to invent the first mobile cell phone. And ironically, my little segue to that is in the late '70s when I was working with the Bell Laboratories company. That company came up with fiber optics. And that fiber optics, for those of you who do or don't know, fiber optics is a strand of glass thinner than your hair, than a strand of hair, carries 10 times the information through it that a copper cable would carry. So that invention helped move everything and fast forwarded everything to the point where this is where we are in this day and time. So the cell phone and the computer, they're kind of one and the same because nowadays your cell phone does have a computer in it. You can go online from your cell phone now. You don't have to go to your computer. You can go right on your cell phone. And what would people do if they didn't have cell phones? What was the other invention, Ronline, that gave you some prestige back in the day? If you had one that let people know you must be somebody other than having that car phone in your car. What was the other electronic device that will let people know you must be something special because you carried it on? It was always attached to your hip or your waist. What would that have been
Besides a mobile phone.
before the mobile phone?
Oh.
Somebody wanted to get in touch with
Oh,
you.
a Walkman?
No, I tell you, Ron Lee definitely missed her breakfast this morning because she talking about a Walkman. A Walkman played music.
I
If
understand.
somebody wanted to reach you,
Oh, the beeper. The
thank you.
beeper. The
The
beep.
beeper. The beeper. That man, you're having a conversation with someone, and that thing go beep 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 beep, beep, and you just kind of reach and look down and see who's calling and click it and turn it off, and you try to get to a phone so you can use it. But that was the way that folks, if they wanted to get with you real quick, that was the way they would do it. And people would say, "Hey, here, take my beeper number.
Yes,
Take my
yes, yes.
beeper number. You want to reach me?
Hmm.
Take my beeper number."
And then they got so sophisticated with the beepers until it was like, okay, when I call you, if I say this or if I say that, whatever they are whatever codes they're typing in,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's me. You know what I'm trying to say in that thing. Yeah. So
And of course, the most important person to have a beeper was a doctor.
yes.
You know, doctor's out somewhere. His beeper goes, "Oh, I got to get back to the hospital.
Yes.
Something's going on. Oh, my beeper went off. Okay, now it's your cell phone. Now, when the cell phone drops into that black hole known as a purse, when it drops into that black hole known as a purse, man, is that something special or what? That thing drops in there and you can't get to it fast enough.
Yes, I understand that, and you're right. I'm thankful that the organizers, well, the manufacturers or whoever designed the purse, put a special compartment of the, for your cell phone so it doesn't drop into that black hole as you mentioned.
Man, you women don't care nothing about that pocket in that purse. Y'all drop that phone in that purse. Y'all don't even care about that. Y'all drop that phone in that purse, and y'all could care less. And then when it goes off, you're digging in the purse for 2 minutes trying to find it, and it's just making sounds. And uh, you know,
Oh,
I,
is
I,
it just 2 minutes? It seems like it's longer. It seems like that's the longest time of your life trying to get to that phone and shut it off.
I don't know. The next time it goes off, somebody's phone goes off in church. I want you to watch the expression of the minister and see what kind of expression he's got on his face. Because I know at times when that thing goes off, you just want to reach out and touch somebody.
Yes, yes,
Why
yes, yes.
didn't you turn your phone off? You know you're coming to church. Turn your phone off.
Correct.
But
Okay.
that nope. That's when we know it's in that black hole and it takes so long to get to it because it's just ringing. Thank goodness it's on a beeping system, but it's still beeping and going off. Or it's somebody don't even do that. They got the ring on, and it's like, oh my goodness.
And then if they call back to back, okay. Well, so let's
Oh
do our
my.
station identification.
Hey, and good morning to everyone. This is the Kitchings Table here, heard every Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. on WBIS LP Awesome Radio 106.9 FM. Catch us on the social platforms at YouTube, Facebook Live, GPAC 23, or Roku. You can find us right there on one of those spots if you want to hear what we talked about, not only today, but previous weeks. Today, we're talking about great inventions, and we're having a little fun with that this morning and talking about how one invention kind of layers over to another. So we're going to move on from the cell phone and the beeper and the antenna on the back of the uh, car
Vehicle.
window. Makes me think about the song by William Devon, "Diamond in the Back, Sunroof Top." You know, yeah, okay, that's a whole that's a whole nother thing. So now to segue from the phones, we're going to go to the first automobile in the United States. Even though automobiles were built overseas in some other countries first, but in the United States, Henry Ford, the founder of the Ford Motor Company, built his first car in 1896, and it was just a little piece of machinery. Had four wheels, two seats, uh, kind of a one handle for steering, and a little motor on the back. And at the time, you didn't have to deal with a whole lot of traffic. If you had that, you got around, and uh, from there, it became the Ford Motor Company and built into a mega corporation. Cars, many, many, many cars. And right now, in this day and time, their most, uh, I guess, best selling car is not even a car, it's a truck. It's the F-150 truck. And man, they can't make those fast enough. But Henry Ford is given credit for being the founder of the Ford Motor Company and building his first car in 1896. But I will say about his car, Ron Lee, you know what he didn't have?
What he didn't have.
He didn't have an antenna on the back window.
He didn't have that.
He didn't have that. There were no windshields on his first car. You
Okay.
know, there were no windshields. Almost like if you ever look at the picture of the car that he first built, it almost it almost looks like a wagon to some point because there's no windshield in the front, no windshield in the back. You're just sitting like on a wagon, a two-person wagon on four wheels, and with a something like it looks like a steering wheel, but like handlebars, and that maneuvered the vehicle around. But uh, the assembly line is one thing that he is definitely given credit for because the assembly line is what helped America win World War II. They took a lot of assembly line companies and converted them into production of military goods and products, and that helped America produce the equipment, the machinery, the artillery, the guns, whatever they needed, they converted and made all this weaponry. But the assembly line was what Ford also put in place to build his cars at a cheaper and faster rate. So we're thankful for him because everything else kind of spun off from him, from the Ford company to General Motors. General Motors, that's an interesting name, General Motors. And they had well, really about 6 or 7 different companies. The remnants of General Motors is GMC, which is only on trucks now. You see GMC trucks, General Motors Company uh, now. And then, of course, the Chrysler Corporation, which spun off Chrysler, Dodge, and Plymouth. Uh, so thank you, Henry Ford, for making that vehicle because it allowed folks to have access to moving about the country. It gave you access and gave you opportunity to move about. And that was a good thing. And when we think about transportation, Ronline, do you remember your first mode of transportation that allowed you to get from one place to another?
My personal or
Yes, your first mode of transportation that you ever had in your life that could take you from point A to point Z.
the bicycle.
There you go. The bike. Now we thought of, I don't know, we might have thought of it as a toy to in some respects, but the bicycle was our first mode of transportation, and you could get on your bike and ride it wherever you wanted to go. There were
Hmm.
no limitations. Even though your parents might have given you limitations, if they weren't around, you would take advantage of that and go someplace until somebody saw you where you didn't weren't supposed to be, and then the word got back. They didn't use a cell phone then. They used word of mouth and got back to the house. And it's like the question became, why were you over at this place when I told you not to leave that place? So, but that was the first mode of transportation. This next invention is so important in this day and time. It is the modern indoor plumbing system. Yes, like I said, these are some must-haves. Without these, I mean, things would be very bad. I mean, when you think about the inventions that people came up with in order to improve the quality, and I think that's what I zeroed in on, improving the quality of life. So um, it says here that in 1826, Isaiah Rogers, an architect, designed the indoor plumbing system for a hotel in Boston. In 1850, Thomas Crapper, and if you ever heard anyone refer to the toilet as the crapper, this is where it
That's
comes from.
where it came from.
This is where it came from, Thomas Crapper. You got it. You've heard, you might have heard someone say, using that word, taking the PER off and just saying, I got to go take a. But
Yeah.
anyway, he's given credit for creating the toilets that became part of the mainstream back in 1850. In 1861, plumbing and sanitary engineers business became famous for their quality of work. So uh, we would have to maybe give him and some others credit, but the invention of the indoor toilet system is a critical part of quality of life in this day and time, because without that, uh, as they did in the rural areas of this country, you would have the outdoor toilet. And for those of you who have never seen and or used that thing, I don't know what else to call it. That that was unbelievable an invention. I mean, even though it had its purpose, and it has, it did what it was supposed to do. That is a very interesting piece of equipment that was invented, and it segues into the what we see nowadays when people have functions and events outdoors, and they have these mobile toilets. That's basically what the outdoor toilet was in rural America, because all it was a big deep hole with a wooden structure placed over it for folks to use the bathroom, and these mobile toilets that they use nowadays for people at events, sporting events, concert events, things of that nature, outdoors, uh, construction sites. That is a modern day version of what the outdoor toilet was. So, but that plumbing system, hey, to be able to create something like that, because it really started way back in Rome in the early times of civilization. Uh, but to put it in a system and to create a water treatment system so that the sanitation could continue. So that was a big invention to create, because who knows where we would be if we didn't have that part of our life modernized to do what it does.
I thought about this when the pandemic first happened. I have some friends that works for the water treatment
Mm-hmm.
centers, and got a chance to take tours, with them or whatever, going through that process of the water system and how it's cleaned and, then filter back to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking, I was like, if it wasn't for this important work, because that is important work,
Right.
we would have the pandemic as we saw it. Uh, we would have so many breakouts way before we did, and on so a wider scale than what we did. A lot of deaths because of if it wasn't for sanitation,
Sanitation.
where would we be?
Dead. We
Right.
will be dead.
Right. When I think about all of that. So, yeah, I had plenty of time to really just consider the things that we have at our fingertips that just seem so effortlessly, but it's a lot of work that goes into making sure we have clean water.
A lot of work, because it is a recyclable resource that can be used again and again, provided it's been treated and cleaned and sanitized. And um, that water that we're talking about now, that is for not so much for consumption but for usage. The water that we use that is used for consumption comes out of springs, and they still must be treated. There still has to be a treatment system.
Hmm.
Even the bottled water, it comes out of the ground from a spring, but it still has to be treated to some degree. Bacteria and other things can wreak havoc on the human body. So you're right. If we didn't have these things, if we didn't have a sanitation system, you invented the plumbing system, sir. But what about the sanitation part? To make sure that that cleanliness or the management of those bacterias and all those other particles that create, you know, some really grotesque smells and images gets taken care of. And somebody has to invent that. Somebody invented that system. So again, we think about what man has invented for the quality of life, and you just have to be thankful. And then finally, Ron Lean, and we can overlap all of these with so many things, but finally, going from the sanitation part to now, I figured this had to be one of the greatest inventions of mankind, and it's called the air conditioner.
Yes.
The air
Certainly.
conditioner. And for folks in Florida, we are so very thankful, because had it not been for Mr. Willis
Oh, yes.
Haviland Carrier, Willis Carrier, 1902, July of 1902, designed the first modern air conditioning system, launching an industry that would fundamentally improve the way we live, work, and play.
Hmm.
He got his idea by being on a train platform in 1902, and he realized that he could dry air by passing it through water to create fog. And from that, he kept working on it, and he eventually came up with a way to provide that fog and make it cool and provide cool air. And that's where we get our air conditioning from, Willis Carrier. If you ever hear the Carrier air conditioning brand, that's what and that's who it came from, Mr. Willis Carrier, who is the designer. So, thank you, sir, for creating the air conditioning system, and thank you for whoever created the air conditioner that was put in automobiles and trucks and trains and planes. Because again, an extension of an invention that this man created. When you get on a plane, if there's no air, it's a miserable trip. Miserable. And you know those nozzles right above you that you can turn to get that air on you and turn it on and turn it off and move it around? Man, without that, whoo, that would not be a good trip.
Yeah, I experienced one of those 45-minute rides
With no air?
with no air. And it was like it
Mm-mm-mm.
was time to touch down. we couldn't
Well, let,
we
let,
couldn't
let's,
get our
let,
destination
let,
fast enough.
let's clarify that. With no air conditioning. You had
Yes,
air, but you had
yes,
no air
air
conditioning.
conditioning. Yes, it was.
Yes.
That
Yes,
little
because
cabin heated up quite. Yeah, it was a
yeah,
mess.
yeah. You in that train, and I mean on that plane, and there's nowhere to go. You can't let down a window. You know, you can't let that window down. You can no, we can't let a window down, and no. Well, turn the air on. It's hot air, man,
Hmm.
and everybody's on there smoking hot and fanning and can't get cool, and boy, you got to shed a couple of layers of clothes if it's it's like it's a miserable feeling. Well, it's even more miserable for the pilots.
Yes, they're in all of the place.
They're in a smaller space,
Yes,
and they are flying right into the sun or whatever. So it's like, okay, it's very warm up there in that cockpit for them. That's with all that electronic equipment, because that electronic equipment generates heat.
yeah, that's what I was thinking about. I've been where those mainframes are, those computers that
Yeah.
take up sizes of walls or whatever,
Yep.
and that's a lot of heat that generates from there. So
And
you're making me think about our plane ride, without that air conditioning going on. And it's like, oh my goodness, when you said that with them being up front, we don't know what's going on behind their closed doors, right? So I'm thankful we made it. I'm glad I'm here to do the show with you.
absolutely. Now, Ronleen, all of that does not happen without the very first item I had on the list.
What's that? What's that?
That was the electricity. Without
Yes, yes,
some electricity or batteries, none of this happens. There is no air conditioning on the plane. As a matter of fact, the plane does not even really. It does fly. You don't need the electricity to fly, but once you got it up in the air, you do need it to run on a battery
yes, you do. Yes, you do.
to provide some power. So the power source is either direct AC or DC. And uh, without that battery, man, we can get you up in the air, but won't be in the air. What do you mean
Yes.
won't be in the air? Won't be in the air.
Mm,
So all these things play into our life as we know it and the quality that we have. And we must be thankful for each one of these men who invented these items in their day and time, who had the forethought to want to improve the quality of life. Because had they not come along, where would we be?
yes.
Where would we be?
So, Earl, you had asked me to talk about our first sheriff for the state of Florida. So, I came up with C.F. DuPont. He became Florida's first elected black sheriff in 1888. He served as sheriff as the Monroe County from 1888 to 1893. And in 2019, okay, you hear me saying the 1800s, right?
Yep.
2019, Sheriff DuPont was indicted into the Florida Law Enforcement Office Hall of Fame.
Well, that's great. Now, just for those who may or may not know Monroe County of Florida, Monroe County in the state of Florida is formerly known as Key West, Florida.
Mm.
So all the way at the bottom, the very tip of the state in Key West in Monroe County, is where this gentleman became the first sheriff. Well, I hope everyone learned a little bit today, had some fun with it. I hope you create your own list of inventions that are important to you. We're thankful that you joined us here on the Kitchings Table, and we hope that you join us again next Tuesday here on WBIS 106.9 FM, Awesome Radio. Until next time, when we bring you something new, something different, and something interesting, I'm Earl Kitchings saying go out and do something good for someone else next week. For Ron Lee Kennedy, we say have a great week. Take care.
Bye bye.